Hi and welcome to my channel. I'm Simon and today I'm back with one of my favourite videos to make. It was one of my favourite videos to make until it got so blinking torturous, and that is my Women's Prize 2023 Longlist predictions video, something I've done for the past many years. In fact, back when I was blogging, before I was even booktubing, I mean, imagine. Anyway, I have 16 books here that are predictions of what we could see on the Women's Prize long list on March the 7th. It has been harder than any year before. Like, seriously, it's been mad. I think at one point I had a list of over 50 books, and I know that there's like well over 100 that are submitted. So to try and guess 16, I know I'm going to go horrendously wrong. I don't think I've guessed more than 6, maybe 7 ever. And over the last few years, it seems to have got progressively less and less. So there we go. Anyway, before we get to the books, I did just want to mention a couple of things that some of you have asked recently. One, are me and my mum going to be reading the long list this year again together, and we'll be making content? Yes and yes. I guess that was 1 and 2 actually. We most definitely are, and I'm really looking forward to it. And also, I was thinking about this, as Mum and I both have channels, is there any extra content you'd like to see? We normally do a sort of reactions video, then we tend to do a what we would choose as our shortlist out of the long list, and then our final video tends to be going in order of our favourites, basically, up before the winner is announced. So yeah, if there's anything else you'd like to see, let me know. The third question I get is, why isn't your mum in your predictions video with you? And I think I can be fully honest in saying that, and probably quoting her, which is when I asked her a while back, she was like, I wouldn't have a clue where to start. And fair enough, so we don't. So I do it solo. This is one of my favourite parts of the year, books-wise. I love, obviously, BookTube when it's people's favourites of the previous year and everything, but there is something about the Women's Prize that just gets me every time, and it's just so lovely that it's something that I now do with my mother. And speaking of my mum, actually, one of the things that I decided to do this year, as there were so many books that I'd read that were eligible, I could have probably just done a list of 16 of those. However, I'm always wrong, as I've said before, and the idea of me ever being so right, I mean, it would never happen, as we've discussed, or as I've wanged on about. The idea of a long list being announced and be like, oh, I've only got a couple to read, right, I'll chat to you in a month, Mum, just isn't quite as fun. So that's why with this list, I've kind of been a bit less books I've read and more books I would like to read. But even so, that was still really, really blinking tricky. And there will be some omissions that people will be surprised by. There'll be some in here that people will be surprised I've even included, possibly. And I'll have a chat with you about the books that didn't quite make my list at the end, because I just want to feel better about it all. But also remind everyone, it's just for fun. Don't come for me if I've missed a favourite book or whatever. Just let me know in the comments down below what you would like to see on the list and what your 16 would be. That would be lovely. Now we're going to crack on with my 16, and I should pre-warn, because there's 16 books, I'm not going to talk about them in too much detail, but also for those that I haven't read, there'll be reasons that I think I'll be on the list, but it might not be to do with what they're about. So I might not talk about that too much, because I don't like to know too much about a book before going in, including my first pick, and I'm doing these in alphabetical order. Oh, and I should say, it was only books that I already had on my shelves. I haven't included any others, partly because I'm too lazy to put a picture here of any that I would mention, but also because I needed to limit myself somehow. It was getting ridiculous because there's that much brilliant fiction by women out. Anyway, so alphabetical order, starting with one of the books that I'm most excited for this year. I haven't read it yet, but I'll be reading it very soon because I'm interviewing the author in Blackwell's Manchester on the 28th of February, and that is Ayobami Adebayo, and this is A Spell of Good Things, which is her second novel. I loved Stay With Me, her debut, so much. It was like a literary thriller about a marriage where the wife in the marriage could not have children, and oh, it was just phenomenal. And I've heard amazing things about this so far. Apparently it's quite heartbreaking. I don't know much about it at all because I want to go into this one a little bit blind, in the sense that I just want to enjoy Ayabami's writing, which I know will be fantastic. Stay With Me was actually the book that I most wanted to win that year. I think it was the year that Naomi Alderman won, possibly. Anyway, very excited for this one. #1 pick. I just think the writing will be incredible. I can't wait. Then we have an author who I've read a couple of books of and enjoyed all of them. And so that suggests more than a couple, doesn't it? Because otherwise I'd say enjoyed both of them. I'm intrigued for this one. It's Horse by Geraldine Brooks. Now this actually, premise-wise, slightly reminds me of a book that was longlisted and possibly even shortlisted a few years ago, 5-6 years ago, and that was Sport of Kings by C.E. Morgan, which was a dynasty of horse breeders and racers. Now, for those of you who've watched me for any length of time, and for those that are new, hello, do stay around. I am not a big fan of anything to do with horses. They know too much, they slightly scare me, and yet I really, really want to read this, partly because it's by Geraldine Brooks, whose writing I really, really like. I have read her, this is going to be bad and I'm going to go off on a tangent, so I'm going to have to look in the book of which ones of hers I've read. I've read The Secret Chord and I've read Year of Wonders, so it is only 2. And Year of Wonders is an incredible book about the only other place outside London that the plague came to in the UK, which is a small village called Eam, which is down the road from where I was brought up in Matlock Bath. And I used to go to the plague cottages and stuff, so that was just such a brilliant book. And then when I read, I've literally just The Secret Chord, I'm not that into religious stories, but it was amazing. And this is set over 3 different time periods. And it deals with a painting that's been sort of lost and forgotten that suddenly gets discovered. And also a racehorse that people become very interested in from the past. And I think the painting is this one here. Oh, you can't see because it's focusing on me. Rightly so. No, joking, the books are way more important than this whole fizzle. It's about this painting, which is, I believe, about one of the first black jockeys in America and looks at basically a history of injustice in America. So I think this is going to be fascinating. I'll read all of these whether they're on the list or not. So even if I don't talk about them in the immediate coming weeks and months, I will be hopefully over the year. Now this may be one that really surprises people. And again, I don't know too much about it other than I heard the term literary thriller. And also I believe it's kind of about these eco-warriors, and that really intrigued me. I didn't like the author's previous book particularly, which many people were very shocked by because it was The Luminaries, and this is Eleanor Catton's Burnham Wood. And I'm just really, really intrigued for this one. I think it sounds quite different, quite, well, I want to read more literary thrillers because I do enjoy them. And actually, The Schoolhouse by Sophie Ward is also eligible, and I would love to see that on there. Like I said, I'd love to see. This is the first year actually where I've thought, why did they cut the long list down from 20 to 16? Because I could have easily filled 4 more spots, and maybe I'll do that at the end. I'm really, really intrigued for this one and have heard amazing things about it from everyone that's read it so far. So that makes me, yeah, inclined to think it could be on there. Now, this next pick is definitely a rogue choice, partly because I don't think many people will have heard of it unless you're in Australia. It actually comes out here next month, and it is This Devastating Fever by Sophie Cunningham. Now, this sounds incredible. Actually, I need to hold that nearer me because then you can read it better. I've just got distracted by this. I'm such like a dog with a squirrel when it comes to this. I'm like, oh, I can't look at anything else. Anyway, this is all about a woman who I believe the book starts in the year 2000 when there was a whole thing about Y2K and there was going to be this millennium bug that was going to make planes fall out of the sky, and everyone was mildly terrified about it. And actually this looks at what has happened since, including like a pandemic / plague and all the things that have happened with Me Too and Black Lives Matter and what humans have been through. And I think it's going to be fascinating. This gives me sort of Olivia Lang vibes, and her novel, which I can see, the Crudo, there we go. I was seeing the crustacean shells and everything on it. Anyway, this gives me Crudo vibes, and I'm just, yeah, mildly fascinated by it. It's been raved about in Australia and comes out here, like I said, next month. So yeah, really, really, really interested for that one and would like to see it on the list. Then we have fifth, we have Dazzling, which is by Chikodili Emelumadu, and this is a magic realist tale. Now, I, in my head, don't often think I like magical realism. However, when I read it, I tend to enjoy it. Like, for example, a book that was on last year's shortlist, Elif Shafak's The Island of Missing Trees, which was my favourite book of last year. Actually, you can see Elif the fig tree just poking out here. I loved it that much. And this is meant to be about two young girls. I only got it very recently, so it's literally popped on the list last minute. It's about two young girls in Nigeria, one who her family are going through a difficult thing, so she makes a bargain with a spirit that she meets at a market, and another one who, due to her father's line, can turn into now is it a leopard or a lion? I think it's a leopard. Yes. And it's kind of what that means, and it's how these two girls' stories intertwine and what follows on for that. And I just think it sounds amazing. Also, that cover should win awards. It's stunning. We then have one that I think will be a popular choice with people, and that's The Rabbit Hutch by Tess Gunty, which won the National Book Award last year and also won the Waterstones debut. This sounds like savage catnip, and the reason for that is that I absolutely love books that are set in apartment blocks where you get to know about lots of different people living in there. It's almost like they're interlinked short stories, but they're kind of not. And I believe that is the case with this, and that intrigues me. And it's had so many rave reviews. I've been meaning to read it. Well, there were lots of books that I meant to get around to in 2022, to be honest, but this was definitely one of them. So I think this could easily make the list, as could Kieran Millwood Hargrave's The Dance Tree, which is a pandemic book but set in the pandemic year of 1518. And I do think possibly pandemic, I'm not saying that people I think people will, I don't know what I'm saying, but I think it would surprise me if there was no books in the list that had something to do with the pandemic in them. This is set in 1518, as I said, and is based on a true dancing pandemic that happened. And it's also a book about sisters, and I think that to me seems very women's prize-ish fodder. So yeah, I'm intrigued with this. I also really like books that are based on factual things that have happened, and this did indeed happen in, where was it? Strasbourg. It said at the very start. I was looking all through the blurb. So there we go. That one. Now, a debut that loads of people have been saying is amazing, and there were so many debuts that could have gone on this list, to be honest. I think that I've already mentioned a couple. What I love every year is the fact that the list is so diverse. So there will always be something that's, I guess, more commercial. I don't like that term really, commercial fiction on the list, and I think this could be the case. Also, it's meant to be very funny, and that's something that you'll sometimes see on the list. It's really good, actually, by Monica Hazy, who also wrote for Schitt's Creek, so instantly I think I'm probably going to laugh a lot at this. I know a lovely woman on Instagram who I've actually met in real life, Libby, and she did this video of her just absolutely not literally wetting herself, but absolutely in hysterics reading one specific scene, but I think also got the giggles the whole way through. It takes a lot for a book to hit my literary funny bone, but I have high hopes for this. So yeah, that's another, I've lost count. I think that was 7, so this should be 8. And this is a book that I've read, one of the few books that I've read that I've selected, and that's Woman Eating by Claire Coder. Now, there are a few books with a supernatural twist that I could have included, and this may be cheating a little bit to say that, but I don't care, because I would love to see Her Majesty's Royal Coven by Juno Dawson on the list. I would love to see Now She Is Witch by Kirsty Logan on the list, and I'd love to see the one about the cannibal, which I think is by Chelsea H. Summers. That might be wrong, I'm sorry if it is. I picked the vampiric book that I read and really loved last year, and I'm really annoyed with myself because I didn't include it in my honourable mentions and I didn't include it in my best of, but it's one of those books where since I've read it, it's grown on me more and more and more. And one, yes, it is a vampire book, but actually it really looks at our obsession with food, it looks at race, and it looks at what it's like to be a woman now. And that's because it's about, and also it's about mother-daughter relationships, and also the passing of time and art, and so much actually. It's a relatively slight book, so you wouldn't think it had that much in it, but honestly, it's just brimming. And yeah, it's about a young woman who, her mother is in a home, her mother, the hospital don't know that she's obviously hundreds and hundreds of years old. She's a vampire, so's her daughter, and her daughter has to fend for herself. They've been living on pig's blood, so they don't feed on humans, but that's running out. And yeah, I just thought it was really, really, really good, and I'm annoyed with myself for not shouting about it more last year. So for it to be on the long list would rectify that, because I'd get to talk about it. So next up we have another book that I haven't read, but is based on fact. And that, again, like I said, really, really intrigues me. But this premise, I just think sounds ace. I don't know if this is quite out yet or whether it's out soon, but it's Cursed Bread by Sophie McIntosh. And again, some of you who've been watching me for quite a while, that sounds like you're all stalkers. Those of you who've been watching this channel for quite a while will know that I read her first book, The Water Cure, and wasn't too sure about it. I liked it, but yeah, there was something, I don't know, it felt very like other books, but didn't quite work for me as well as those other books did in that sort of oeuvre. I've not said that for a while. Let's say it again. Oeuvre. Anyway, this is based on a true story of a whole town that got poisoned, I think, by the bread. And that, to me, I'm like, oh, I just want to read that right now. I want to devour that, but not end up being poisoned by it. Thank you very much. So yeah, Cursed Bread by Sophie McIntosh. Then, now, this book, I'm already in my, heart and head have sort of made peace with the fact I don't know if this will be on the list, because I just think it's such a Marmite book. However, I do feel like the long list of the Women's Prize can quite often be quite Marmite in terms of you've got 5 different judges with very different tastes. And it tends to me when the shortlist comes out that there'll be like every year, I mean, some years long lists are absolute bangers, but there will be like a banging shortlist regardless, which is the reason why I love the prize so much. And this, like I said, could be a Marmite book. I've given it far too long an introduction. I have read it. It was my second favourite book of last year, and it's Bono by Tessa Moshfegh. And I just think this is a gritty, dark, gothic masterpiece. It tells of one town called Bono, where we meet a young boy called Marek who, he ends up doing something really awful and having to leave living with his father. His mother's dead, he believes. Everyone believes. I feel like that maybe gave something away slightly. Sorry. I don't think it does. I think you guessed that from the little breadcrumbs, not cursed bread, but little breadcrumbs that Tessa Moshfegh leaves for you. Anyway, and he goes to live with another man who's pretty odious, who lords over the whole town, and it's how we get to see all the different facets of this place. It's a book that's very much about grief, what we inherit from our parents that's not just genetics. It's about survival, greed. It's got an amazing, I was going to say witch, and she is kind of a witch, but also she's, there's just so much in here that's so good. And I'm really shocked I didn't do a video solely on this book last year, because it was one of those kind of books for me. That's how much I loved it. I could wang on about it for ages. I actually find it very hard to succinctly talk about this, as you may have guessed, because I want to just wang on about it so much. But yeah, I just thought it was an absolute dark, delicious, gritty gem of a gothic masterpiece. There we go. So there's some hype around that. Then a novel that I have not got around to, even though I really, really wanted to last year. Team with that theme for a lot of them. We have Night Crawling by Layla Motley, who famously became the youngest author ever to be longlisted for the Booker Prize. And this is about a young girl who I think ends up looking after a young boy for various different reasons. It's one of those books where I've heard lots of murmurings around it, but I never quite 100% got what it's about. I believe there's also a trans storyline in here, which I think is brilliant. So yeah, I'm intrigued for this one and would like to get to it in the not too distant future anyway, but would be even more likely to get to it. In fact, I would definitely get to it if it was longlisted for the Women's Prize. And clearly I'm going to need tissues for this one, because apparently everybody bawls and this really, really gets to you. Apparently it's really quite hard to read in a lot of ways, but that's also something that I think is really important in literature when we're hearing about, even though this is not autofiction, I think Layla has written it from what she has seen in America. And yeah, so there we go. We've got that one. And then, oh goodness, are we on like, well, I've only got 4 to go. One of my favourite books of last year that really surprised me is I'm a Fan by Sheena Patel. Now, I have the amazing cloth-bound, sparkly hardback of it, which was the limited edition when it was named Foyle's Book of the Year last year. And this book is so brilliant. I feel like this book should be compulsory reading for anyone who is on social media, particularly Instagram, because it does look at that. And whilst I've read quite a few books about social media and stuff, I'm just like, ugh. The whole way through I was like, oh my goodness, yes, oh my goodness, yes. Which is going to sound slightly worrying when I tell you about the plot of it, because it's about a woman who's having an affair with a man who is well, they're both having affairs with each other. She has a boyfriend, he has a girlfriend, but he's also seeing someone else. And that person is well known on Instagram, and it's how our protagonist sort of follows that person on Instagram, then possibly even in real life, and looks at all of the whole thing around Instagram and how we feel like we know someone's life and yet we don't, but also how people can behave utterly bonkersly on social media, whilst also talking about what it's like to be a woman of colour in Britain today, on the dating scene, and also, yeah, it felt very real. It's also told in vignettes, which I really like, so you'll get some pretty, can't see any short bits there, you see what I mean? But I just found it so spot on with so much. I just think it's a real corker, so yeah, would like to see that on the list. Then we have The Furrows by Namwali Serpel, which is about a young girl who's, when she's looking after her brother, I think there's an incident where he goes missing in the water, so they're clearly by the sea, and it's how the grief of that lasts with her whole family, but also with her, and how she sees her brother here and there, and she retells the story to different people in order to get different reactions to it. And yeah, this sounds really, really interesting. It was on, I think it was on Barack Obama's books, like his best books of 2022 list, because I know he does a couple of different lists, but I feel like it was that one, not his summer reading list. And that really, really made me intrigued to read it. But also, yeah, I've heard incredible things and think this could be a contender. You will have noticed we've got to S, and there are some of my favourite ever authors that I haven't mentioned. We will come to that. Don't think we won't, because we will. There will be a reckoning. Penultimately, my 15th prediction is Briefly a Delicious Life by Nell Stevens. Another book that I've heard nothing but amazing things about. Historical fiction, told through the voice of a ghost, so could have fallen into that supernatural category that I talked about earlier. This is sort of based on fact, but obviously kind of completely not, because it's told through the eyes of a ghost who I think died when she was 14, but has been a ghost for quite a while, and who becomes quite obsessed with the author George Sand, who goes and stays in a monastery in Mallorca, is it? With Frédéric Chopin, and how she sort of looks out for George Sand, and there's something quite sapphic, I think, that goes on, and that intrigues me all the more. So yeah, I'm really, really, really excited to read this, and annoyed with myself that I haven't, because this was one that I did keep saying last year, I will read that, blinking didn't, what a fool. And then a surprise for my last book, because I didn't think I was going to enjoy this at all, so it is a book that I've read, but I absolutely was hooked by it. I want to talk to everyone about it, so if you've read it, please let's have a chat in the comments below. Literally can't stop thinking about it. It's a book that shouldn't have worked for me because it's told in the we perspective, which I don't really like as a stylistic choice. And it also has a lot about it that goes unresolved, which can sometimes really like make me furious. But also there's just things that are quite spooky and odd within its pages where you can't work out whether something supernatural is or isn't going on. What is the book, Simon? It is Brutes by Diz Tate. And this, honestly, it's about a group of girls who are living in Florida, and they have this, they're real tight-knit, they have this like we dialogue as we learn, and they watch this other girl who, as the novel goes on, you know this from the blurb, so it's not a spoiler, goes missing, and they believe they know what happened, but they keep quiet, including to the reader. You have to read on to see what may or may not have happened. And as it went on, I was like, this is, you know, I wasn't being annoyed by the we at all, but I was like, where is this going to go? And then you start to get into the mindset of each one of them when they're older and what they believe happened, but also other things they've seen. And the reason that I'm actually getting a bit tingly and a bit shivers down my spine about it is there's some really odd things in here that just utterly kind of made me go, ooh, but in a really brilliant way, even though you never find out whether they're true or not. That sounds really vague, and I'm hoping to join CJ Reid when she does her Sunny's book club on the 5th of March, because I'm desperate to talk about it with people, and that to me is another reason why I think this could end up on the list. Now, I will say, I don't know if all of these have been submitted. I could be completely wrong, and you'd be right in thinking, but Simon, where on earth is Maggie Farrell? Maggie Farrell? She's nowhere. Maggie O'Farrell is what I meant. Where is Maggie O'Farrell? Where is Kate Atkinson? Where is Camilla Shamsi? Where is Natalie Haynes? And you could say the same about Jess Kidd, Jessie Burton. I mean, I was going to say Lucy Strout. That's not right. Elizabeth Strout. They all could be on the list, and I'd be thrilled if they all were. And actually, particularly with Kate Atkinson and Maggie O'Farrell, because I'd love to read those with Mum and see how we both feel about them, because they're two of our favourite authors. But like I said, I wanted to mix it up. Also, I don't know if I feel like they're safe bets because of there being all of this other fiction, like I've mentioned, like the endless amount of books that I could have talked about instead. I also, like I meant to say when I picked Sophie Cunningham, Fiona McFarlane has got a new book out. That could easily be on the list. I've seen that that's on the Walter Scott Prize long list. If I was going to add 4 more, it would be Maggie O'Farrell's The Marriage Portrait. It would be Stone Blind by Natalie Haynes. It would be Shrines of Gaiety by Kate Atkinson. And either, see I'm cheating again, it would either be Camilla Shamsi's Best of Friends, or I'm looking because they're all around me because the floor is chaos from where I've picked up all the books, or it would be Lucy by the Sea by Elizabeth Strout, which was one of my absolute favourite books of last year, but I can't work out whether that's because I'd read all of the Lucy Barton stories in the lead up to that. But again, that's a pandemic-y book I think is done absolutely brilliantly. Anyway, we've almost reached 30 minutes. I'm quite shocked that this video is that short. I know that's quite long, but I'm still shocked it's this short. I could have talked probably for about 4 hours if you'd let me. I would love to know in the comments down below any books that you think will make the Women's Prize long list, or give me all 16 that you predict. I would love to see that list. If you've done a video on it, link that down below too, because then I can go and have a gander at what you've picked and see if it makes me find some books that I've not heard of and adds ever more books to the everlasting, never-ending mental TBR I've got in my brain, or wish list like I've got in my brain. I mean, this TBR is quite excessive as it is. But anyway, moving on, because I could waffle on for hours, let's be honest. I hope you've enjoyed this. Let me know your thoughts on my list. Let me know in the comments down below, like I said, what books you think will be on the long list. Are you going to read the long list this year? What content would you like me and Mum to create around the long list? And anything else. If you'd like to subscribe, please feel free to do so, and like this video if you liked it. If you didn't like it, don't tell me. Just like I don't want you to come for me if you didn't like my list. It's all just meant to be fun, unless you're one of the authors that are up for the Women's Prize, potentially, in which case this could be incredibly nerve-wracking and quite tense. Bit like it was for me trying to pick that 16, and I'm sure my list would change and be completely different if I filmed this tomorrow, which I'm not going to because I filmed it today. I will speak to you all soon. I hope you're all doing super duper well. Bye.